So this video takes on that complex issue that a lot of folks who are going through narcissistic divorces ask, which is, how does staying in this relationship affect my kids? And is there some better path, right? So listen, folks, we talk a lot about this idea of choice in narcissistic relationships. Well, what's better? If I stay or I go? Or should I go no contact or low contact or gray rock or yellow rock? Listen, choice might be too friendly a word there, because choices are real options that have value to each of them. In narcissistic relationships, as with any relationships characterized by relational trauma or betrayal trauma, these don't feel like choices. Or I suppose you could see it as choosing between two different kinds of pain. In intimate relationships, people may be trying to decide between staying in a soul-sapping relationship that's very unhealthy versus having to navigate post-separation abuse and all the problems of the family court system. I mean, in family relationships, you're trying to navigate lifetime emotional manipulation and the shame and stigma of family estrangement versus maybe losing contact with more than just a few people that just the people you're trying to disengage from, but other people in that family system you love, but that will hurt your relationships if you were to step away. In toxic workplaces, so-called leaving, maybe actually leaving a career you spent years and years training for. And then there might be sort of the equivalent of some sort of post-work separation abuse, which can look like losing your reputation or a livelihood. These aren't real choices. Actually, cult expert Dr. Janja Lalich calls them bounded choices. You don't really have the full spectrum of choice in front of you. And that takes people to what I really think that is raised as one of the ultimate impossible choices in narcissistic relationships. What is better for my children? Us splitting up, living in two separate homes, or staying together? And then there's the question we often don't grapple with. If I stay in this relationship, what happens? So there's a couple things, a few issues I want to put at the top of this video here. You got to ask the question, are these children in any form of physical or other danger? And that can be danger from the harmful parent or from people the harmful parent or the narcissistic person has around them. Are the children witnessing violence towards you that could also potentially put them at risk for being collateral harm? If these are the kinds of issues you are facing, there are much, much bigger sort of safety, legal issues that require a much higher level of consideration. This is no longer just a narcissism conversation. It's a safety conversation. And we've put some resources in the video notes for you, because that's really where getting that kind of level of guidance is necessary. This video will not be able to get into those issues and may not be as relevant for you. But when we aren't dealing with those kinds of ramifications, this conversation gets a hell of a lot more murky. And the biggest question becomes, I don't want to deal with family court. I don't want to lose half my time with my children. I actually am financially dependent, and this would hurt my kids financially. This relationship's bad, but it's not bad enough that necessarily I need to leave. I don't really like my partner. It's not a great relationship. It's not terrible. I wish it was different, but it's not. It would be harder for my kids if I did it, or it could be that culturally I couldn't leave. But at the same time, I am worried about what me staying in this relationship is doing to my children. And listen, folks, you know how I approach this. I'm sick and tired of all the guidance out there saying that the only path forward in a relationship that's characterized by all these narcissistic patterns is leaving. Assuming we're not talking about that full-on level of severity, it's really not. And it means that for people who can't leave, they often feel completely stuck, right? There's often a sense of shame and despair. Like, I can't leave, so now what? And many people don't leave, can't leave, and everyone has a different story. So there's no one-size-fits-all prescription. Both sides have problems, okay? So from the relationship side, I understand that people who stay worry that you're worried that your children are seeing the model of a relationship where it's a person who doesn't treat their other partner well. That's not the model of marriage or relationship you want them to see. Or that they may see that their other parent gives you the silent treatment, or is rageful, or is critical, or is unkind, or is inconsistent, or pathologically selfish. And you worry what that means to them as they go into adulthood and someday choose a partner. One thing that is tricky and that takes a long time to see that you are in a toxic relationship for all the reasons we've discussed. So your children may actually grow up like this for a while, having a narcissistic parent, before you really even have a name for this or even an awareness that, okay, this is not okay, and I hate that my children are witnessing that. It could very well be that your younger children could end up having a very different experience of your relationship than your older children do. Maybe things deteriorate more, maybe you get it more. So that's how siblings could have different experiences of this. But what is it like for a child to grow up with one narcissistic parent and another parent that is healthy but beleaguered by the narcissistic parent? You know what the short answer is? It's not easy for your kid. Some of this comes down to the family role of your child. Listen, the scapegoated kids, they're going to suffer the most. And if you're a parent and you really want to get this right, the healthier parent, you must protect that child at any cost. But sadly, sometimes that child doesn't get the protection they need. That can harm that kid. But all the other kids in the family too, whether they're golden children or highly sensitive kids who are fixers and rescuers or truth tellers or truth seers, they're suffering too in their fashion. It just may not be as obvious in the same way as it might be sometimes for that scapegoated child. Ultimately, whatever the role of the child, your child is on the receiving end of a pathologically selfish, entitled, dysregulated, grandiose, demanding, variably empathic parent who often expects their child to praise and value and adore and worship them. And if the kid doesn't, then that child gets the really unsettling experience of watching the sort of lights turn off on their narcissistic parent's face. Your child learns that they have to worship or emulate or militarily obey that parent. The child gets programmed into simply being an object for or to that parent, doing what that parent wants when they want, and learning that the only way to be loved by that parent is completely being in line with that parent. And that's not good for a child. The child is also subjected to that narcissistic parent's guilt and self-victimization. Things like, I do so much for you, I've given up so much for you, and you don't appreciate it. So the message of self-subjugation gets cemented in these relationships because you will either be rejected, raged at, or shamed or guilted if you're the child of a narcissistic parent. And the healthy parent in these relationships faces the impossible burden of having to parent under these circumstances. Is it possible to sustain healthy parenting when you're doing it alongside a narcissistic co-parent? Yeah, but you're always swimming against the current. It's like building up a tower of blocks and just having it knocked down every time you get to the top. It's also about being the sole source of consistent empathy, compassion, and frankly, reality. Now, where it gets even trickier is that when that narcissistic parent shows up as what seems like a fun or an available parent at times. They coach the team. They let the kids stay up late. They help them with their homework. They let them play video games or hang out on their tablet all day or takes them to the amusement park. Or let's say the parent loves to fish or cook and the child does the activity and does it well. Well, then that narcissistic parent may actually seem very focused on that child and spend lots of time. The narcissistic parent may get a lot of supply from that. The parent gets to do the thing that the parent likes, and the kid becomes an extension from them. Obviously, though, the downside of this is that the day the kid stops wanting to do the thing that narcissistic parent likes, the narcissistic parent can lose interest. But it's that whole terrible partner great parent model. Now, Dr. Christine Cocciola argues that if one parent mistreats another parent, no matter how much they seem like a great parent to the kid, mistreating the child's other parent automatically qualifies them as harming the kid, so that's not a good parent, right? So that's viewing it more holistically. And she's spot on, because many kids are actually aware that the narcissistic parent may very well treat them one way and may actually treat their other parent in another, like really unkind to the parent but nice to them, which puts the kid in an impossible triangulated position. They want to stay safe and seen by the narcissistic parent, but they may simultaneously feel guilty and uncomfortable about their other parent not being treated as well as even them. And at times, the child may be put into the impossible position of having to be the keeper of secrets for the narcissistic parent. For example, they may see or become aware that their parent is, having an inappropriate relationship and are told something like, Mom doesn't need to know about all this stuff we did here today. She gets angry about everything. So that shame and sense of moral injury once the child kind of gets what's happening, can trail the child for a lifetime, as can the sense of mistrust that they may hold for all relationships going forward. But this video is about what happens to my child. I decide to stay. What happens? Keep in mind, in many cases, it isn't about staying or not staying, because the child will continue to have contact with their narcissistic parent if you don't stay. So the real conversation here is, what is the impact of a narcissistic parent, which we know, like I said, all the stuff I've been saying, it can be that sense of relationships are transactional, the loss of a sense of self. I have to become what the other person wants me to be, feeling like you're not enough, believing love has to be earned, self-doubt, self-blame, guilt, anxiety, shame. The added challenge is that the child also, as children, have to witness all the unhealthy stuff of the narcissistic relationship and may, depending on what the relationship is like, view you negatively for not leaving an unhealthy relationship. Now, in the more fortunate version of this, as your kids kind of get what's going on, they may just keep encouraging you to leave or wondering why you haven't. Like I said, none of this is fair. But, and this is a big but, the healthy parent is important in all of this and can be a safe space to land, a consistent place to land, a place where reality isn't questioned. So if you stay, it can feel that you're there to just sort of protect them. And this next part is important. A major issue raised by many, if not most, survivors of a narcissistic parent and a healthy parent, and this is going to be hard to hear, is a sense of being abandoned or disappointed by that healthy parent because they felt that that healthy parent was so busy trying to please and appease and manage the narcissistic parent. Again, you may be saying, this is so not fair. I was trying to protect them. And for a while, I didn't know what the hell their other parent was about. And once I knew, I changed it up. But I also put a lot of energy into managing that parent to protect my child. I'm here to tell you, no, it's not fair. It really isn't. But children don't know from fair. And many adult children from these relationships, some of them do feel guilty in adulthood for having these feelings about their healthy or not narcissistic parent. And many protective, not narcissistic, healthier parents feel devastated and hurt at this idea that their kid feels that they were abandoned by them. Listen, narcissistic relationships are unfair in every way, including the collateral damage. And this is just one more of those unfairs. Because you're right. If you are in one of these relationships, you will be at times diffusing a psychological bomb of their narcissistic parent. And so you'll be distracted by the chaos and the pain and the invalidation of these relationships. You're a human being. You will have felt that, and it would have affected you. So the big question is, are your kids doomed? And I say no, of course they're not. I mean, some kids do suffer more than others. Scapegoats often the most. But kids who grow up with a narcissistic parent tend to be all those things I said, right? The anxiety, the shame, the guilt, all of it. But what we know from the attachment literature and from development, human development in general, one healthy caregiver can be all the difference in the world. A place to create a secure attachment, to feel somewhat psychologically safe in, to be attuned to be attuned from. It sucks because it's not great to grow up this way. And as their parent, you may very well feel complicit and responsible and guilty, all the icky stuff that the not narcissistic parent feels for having them have chosen this other parent, if you will. But if you don't leave, sometimes you are that same place to land most of the time for your child. The hard work when you are in a narcissistic marriage or relationship and have children is to do the work yourself, learn how to navigate this, and simultaneously be a present and available caregiver. Again, all at the same time. It's like trying to juggle and play the piano at the same time. Balls are going to drop. And I'm aware in saying all of this, that once again, the burden is on you, you're doing it all, and the narcissistic parent is sort of getting away with it. This is where that whole concept I talk about of true north comes in. None of this is fair. You are not responsible for the toxic person's behavior. But when children are involved, we do have to take responsibility for being the buffer and the support, which is why I always come back to the same place. You need your support. You need your people who have your back. And it ain't your spouse. There's some basic Narcissism 101 stuff to remember here, of course. Don't speak badly about the narcissistic parent to the children, but find places away from your kids where you can talk about it, just not with the kids. Don't ever tell the kids that their parent is narcissistic. They don't understand it. If they bring it to you when they're adults, that's a different conversation. Do not triangulate or use your child as a source of information or intel. Do not shame your child for trying to have a relationship with that other parent. I get it. It can feel like a betrayal that they want to be close to that other parent. It's the hardest part of this. Giving them space to do that, though. And yeah, knowing that they'll probably get let down and hurt, and having to be the one to hold them and help them afterwards. I know as parents we want to prevent that hurt, but you can't always do that. Just about every person who stays in a narcissistic relationship and has children will wonder if they would have been better off and ask themselves, would they have been better off if I left and went through the whole post-separation and family court stuff and got to the idea? And every person who leaves a narcissistic relationship wonders if their children would have been better off if they had just stayed and been under the same roof. Not really a choice, right? There's no right answer. And there are hundreds and hundreds of variables in the equation. The severity of the narcissism, the severity of their behavior, the types of betrayal, the kind of mental health fallout you experience, your children's temperaments and needs, the way the narcissistic parent shows up as a parent versus as a partner, your supports, your financial wherewithal, assuming that there's no imminent physical danger. Remember that this video is not about those kinds of relationships, regardless of staying or going. The bad news is that your kids will be affected because having a narcissistic parent is not good for us. The good news is that if you can be there for your children and get support for managing the narcissistic relationship, kids who grow up like this, and yes, kids who grow up like this, we do have stumbles and struggles. There's no two ways about it. But it can be fine-ish. And no, your child having a narcissistic parent doesn't necessarily doom them to having a narcissistic relationship down the road. But it is very much about having open conversations. But again, just as we can't protect our kids from skin knees, we can't protect them from everything else too. The hardest part of all is to not talk badly about the parent, but also not gaslight your child. Finding that way of saying, I am so sorry that X or Y happened. It's not your fault, but I know it hurts. And sometimes grown-ups, in fact, oftentimes grown-ups don't get it right. And it's not a you thing, it's a them thing. Finding ways of saying that to your kids. It's also about leaning into those multiple truths that I talk about, especially as your kids get older. You could say, I know you love Dad, Mom, fill in the blank. I know you love them, so this must feel hard, and I am sorry. I'm here if you want to talk. You hold space for their complicated feelings and, frankly, their confusion. You can subtly let them know that perhaps some sort of betrayal from their parent is not okay. You can let them know you're a soft place to land, but you can also know that you understand that they may love that parent, whatever that love means to them. There is no right path on the stay-go side when you've got kids. The right path is supporting yourself, learning about these patterns, being there for your children, and recognizing that it will be a bumpy path where you will be judged by lots of people. All of that is radical acceptance. Please don't be hard on yourself thinking, had I stayed, then this would have happened, or had I left, then that would have happened. When you go through narcissistic relationships, you will always look back ruefully and regretfully on the path you didn't take. You staying focused on your role as a parent and recognizing that you cannot play offense with the narcissistic person, focus instead on radically accepting defense and empathic support with your children. That's the path. Trying to take the bet on this and wondering if one bet is the better path, staying or going, it's an impossible ask. It's an impossible prediction. And it can leave you stuck and ruminating. Nobody else knows the answer on this for you, whether you stay or go. And sometimes for some people, in a moment in time, you'll say, there's no way, I cannot right now. Okay, then you be that parent, that protective, soft place to land, attuned to your children, recognizing that, yeah, they may actually have whatever relationship they have with the narcissistic parent, and it might even feel icky like a betrayal period of your life. And it may very well be that down the line, as your kids emerge and get it, you may make a different choice too. This is children develop, and that development also leads to an evolution in all of this. Kids are different. The nature of relationships kids have with a narcissistic parent are different. Different narcissistic parents are different kinds of parents, and how this all factors into a decision is complicated. But this idea of what happens to my kids if I stay, there's a lot of it depends, but some of it can really be buffered if you can be present with them. And it is probably one of the hardest parenting roles a person can ever take, to put yourself fully into keeping those children as psychologically safe and mirrored and loved and seen as you can when you're getting none of that from their other parent. Thanks again.